So, Shime, tell me how long Henny has been in Nigeria, and what are the state of the art right now of the activities Henny is doing in Nigeria?
NI Ajib has been in Nigeria as far back to over 40 years now. Their operations have not been different from other multinationals, but in a way, they operate in a more strange way than others, because most of the times their styles, lead to a lot of crises. But silently, they operate in a mafia style, which places them as one of the most dangerous companies, in Nigeria. Whereas others are very, very open. You can see their activities, you can talk about them, you can complain about them, you can protest, can be organized against them, but you hardly organize protest against NI without meeting the worst type of, forceful resistance. That is the exception in theirs. But at the other side of it is that investigating them, especially in terms of admittance to cause of, spills, for instance, I think to an extent they do admit more than some other companies where they are the cause. But after the admission, what they do next becomes the most horrendous thing to do. One would have expected that, yes, they admit where it is human error, they admit where it is equipment failure, they admit where it is operational failures, and having made such admission, that they will be equally as truthful, as honest, as humane to move a step further by taking care of the problems. But they may make those admissions, but they will not do anything, and they will still use brute force to resist anything that is coming from complaining victims.
How many drilling area or activities Eni is having in the Delta?
It is difficult for me to, say with specification, that because part of the problems in this country is lack of data, accurate data, availability of accurate data. Because one, even the companies themselves will not disclose to you, the government officials will not disclose to you, and you do not have the facilities to go tracing all of them because there are security risks equally involved in doing that. So whatever figure will be speculative.
And what's happening with the gas flaring and Eni?
Well, it's a very ridiculous situation because some time ago, I think it was in 2010 or 2011, Eni put in their on their websites, in their reports, that they are now operating almost at a zero flare level situation in Nigeria, whereas no flare of NI had been put out. All the flares were still ongoing. And the one that is most visible, two that are very, very visible, the NI flare at Ebocha, and their flare at Akalolu, all in River State, are very, 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 very visible. Even as at the time they said that they have put off everything, those flares were still on. But what they have done as of today, because there were open sources, they were very, very open, there was no protection, there was no seclusion, so you can stay on the road and see the flare, see the velocity, see everything. But for the Ebocha situation, recent checks shows that they have fenced of, the area, so visibility becomes a little bit, difficult. Now, not visibility as in terms of seeing the flare, because it is a horizontal flare, so you still see it, but access, getting close, is now difficult, and that arose from a situation where, to cover up their leaking gas pipelines, because in Ebocha community in 2011, so many of their gas pipelines were leaking, and it got to a head when it caused an accident. A vehicle was burnt down. It caused the loss of a human being. That was with the uproar that greeted that. We made a video of the gas leaks before that accident to show that this is dangerous and I should do something about it. And after that, the accident occurred. And I think that may have contributed to their now deciding to fence off that area.
What's the impact of gas flaring on the communities?
Well, enormous. Because even though in most situations, the community people don't even understand the level of destruction that visits them as a result of the presence of gas flares. But scientific research has traced to show what it causes. But the visible one is that, one, it corrodes their buildings, roofing sheets, okay? It burns off the heat, burns off, areas around it, to the extent that such lands become unusable for agricultural activities. For rivers or waterways that are around or very close to gas flare stacks, those are no longer usable because fishes can no longer live there, apart from the pollution, the lead poisoning that goes into the water that kills them off, the light. And for hunting expedition activities, those can no longer take place because of the brightness of the flares that electrifies the whole place all the time, which makes it difficult for bush animals to have residence in such places. Now, that is on economic side and livelihood side, so it leads to loss of livelihoods for the community people. On health side, of course, gas flare have been traced to cause chronic bronchitis, asthma, lung, skin diseases, and the rest of them. In fact, some impairments and premature births, and at times leads to death. Okay, so that is on that. And then generally on economic side, it's not just the community people that even loses. Equally, the nation loses, resources and revenue from the gas that is being flared, which could be gathered, utilized, sold, and money and revenue generated out of it. So it's a compound loss to the people of Nigeria.
And how does the community get resistance towards these activities, and how ERA, for example, is working with those communities to defend themselves?
Well, like I said earlier on, in most cases, the community people do not even understand, the problems associated with this, and that is why in some communities, like in communities in Delta states, it's been noted that the locals go close to the gas flaring stacks to dry off their consumable, what is called bogare, tapioca processing. They use the gas flares the heat from the gas flare to process that, and they don't understand, the impact. And the companies don't alert them on the negative impacts associated. Government do not alert them on the negative impacts associated. So this is where ERA and other groups, like-minded groups, come in. We first and foremost try to educate the people on the impact of this and to warn them to stay clear. Now, following up from that understanding, they are mobilized, because first is for them to be enlightened, to understand the situation, so that they do no longer think when a relative dies, they attribute it to witchcraft from another relative that killed the person. They will now know that it is a direct consequence of so many years of inhalation of the, poison released by the gas flare stacks in the legs and the rest of them. So now that is it. When they are mobilized, they will now be able to speak out. That is where they now begin to organize themselves for resistance movements. So they will now begin to speak out on the issues, and begin to ask relevant questions. So following up from there, at times we work with community people to now begin to address policymakers, because those are people that, at least in some occasions, we are able to speak to them, to begin to look at the plight of their people, to see how they can, assist, and begin to petition the companies. And of course, as a last resort, we now support where we can in litigation.
Do you know that Eni is owned by the state of Italy by 30%? So Eni should be the company of every Italian person.
Yeah.
What would you say to the Italian government and to the Italian citizens?
Yeah, it is a very simple message. In Italy, the Italian government will not allow the operators to flare gas in Italy. It's not possible, because they know it is harmful. So if they will not allow the operators, they should, because they have the power to regulate the activities of Eni, even offshore. Okay? Now, it's simple. Tell them, instruct them, coax them, beg them. The way you behave in Italy, behave the same way in Nigeria, so that the goodwill that you enjoy in Italy, because I know that if Eni is a bad company in Italy, by regulation, it would have been killed. The company would have been killed if it was such a terrible bad company. The way it behaves in Nigeria, if it was behaving like that in Italy, I am not sure that it would have continued to exist. Okay? So, just the same way they behave in Italy, let them behave the same way in Nigeria, so that it can enjoy the respect of Nigerians the way it enjoys in Italy, so that the revenue flow can continue. Our campaign will never be that Eni go back to Italy. No, but you are in business, do business with respect. Respect your hosts, because they are no less normal than you, human beings than you. And for every corporate practice, for every business, you are doing business to better the lot of human beings. Primarily, every other thing is secondary. So if you are hurting some human beings elsewhere to make some human beings, happy, then you are not balancing, because those ones you are hurting, if they come after you, you will not have the opportunity again to make the other person happy. So that is it. If they operate in a fair, humane way, respecting their hosts as critical stakeholders, in the business enterprise, then I think everybody will be happy. They pay their taxes and royalties to the Nigerian state and ensure that communities, are not hurt. Everybody will be happy.
At that point, it's not a question, it's more a statement. Eni in Italy is not a good company.
Okay.
There has been lots of scandals because hundreds of workers in the petrochemical sector, directed by Eni, has died from the 70s to the late 90s. There has been lots of judgment against Italy, some condemned, penal condemned, because hundreds of workers died in one single plant, in one single petrochemical plant. So I think it's important that, I'm not saying that the dimension of the devastation is the same, but it's important also to understand that in Italy, Eni is not such a good company neither, and that this double standard is true up to a certain level. Because we have problems with Eni, because Eni is not respecting the people in Italy, it's not respecting the Italian workers, and it's a common battle, if I have to say. This is not true that Eni does things perfectly in Italy. It probably does things better, but it's not perfect.
I know that there is no perfect entity. Both as individuals, we are not perfect. But striving to balance up things. Okay? Now, the situations are different because part of the problem NI might be having in Italy, which I follow part of it, the issue of corruption, for instance. Okay? I followed a lot of investigations on NI, even by secret investigators. Okay? Those ones are there. They are happening at a higher level in Nigeria because there is connivance between the companies and people at the corridors of power and the rest of them. Yeah. But in terms of practice, and we are looking at gas flaring, I'm not sure that NI flares gas in Italy. Even in their petrochemical, sites, I am not very sure. But other part of their, production activities could lead to the, crisis that you've talked about. And some of them they will deny and say is equipment is not man-made. But we are talking of the ones that are man-made. Can you remove them first? Remove them. And then let's now begin to look at those ones that are occurring as a result of operational malfunctionings and malfunctionalities. Okay? Then it means that we are graduating to a level. But here, it is still crude operational methodologies. Operational methodologies that have been outsourced, is no longer in vogue in the global community. It's still what is being practiced in Nigeria by NI and the others. So this is where, the thin line is drawn when I say that, they are a better company in Italy than they are in Nigeria.
And what do you think about, is Eni using dividing strategies within the communities?
I mean, I've just told you that they use the most rugged and most brutal way. And how does it happen? The divide and rule tactics, is very, very evident. NI looks up in a community where there is a problem. Instead of tackling the problem, they look for one prominent personality who is ready to compromise the entire community and settle that person who will feel, well, I didn't lose anything. So this is a very generous company. So, and they've given me all this. So, well, after having collected, they won't tell you that is why they are giving to you. After having collected from them, it is either they set you up in the community to inform the other members of the community that they have settled the problems. Or when the community comes to them and says, we don't understand what you're talking about. We had already solved the problems. We have settled this man. You go and ask him. And you know what that can lead to. Alternatively would be if the person is a strong personality, they will tell the person, okay, we've settled you, we've seen you, we've paid all this and that. Now you have to make sure that your community is calm. You know what that means.
Do you know that Eni was one of the main funders giving money to Italian international cooperation? What do you think about this, the fact that Eni gives money for international cooperation?
Yeah, well, you see, I will not be surprised. And in any case, it doesn't look to me to be out of place because the IOCs, they try to destroy here and paint greenwash, okay? Because when they support the international cooperation, from Italy, then everybody thinks that, well, they are doing such fantastic work. Of course, well, you have to destroy a little here since you're already contributing to doing these great things here. It's a PR thing. So one is not surprised. But I think the question is, even the shareholders who are majority Italians, what do you discuss at your AGMs? What do you tell the directors of the company, those that operate the company day to day? What do you tell them? Are you just happy that profits are declared and you get your dividends, and the source and what leads to those profits, you are not interested? It becomes an issue. These are the type of questions that we should be asking. Yeah.